Hello, my name is Andy and I am the village idiot, and I'm with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. Welcome back to the East Riding of Yorkshire. Now, I'm filming this intro halfway round my route walking around this absolutely lovely village, and I can tell you that you're in for a treat with this one. Welcome to Bubwith. Bubwith is situated about 6 miles northeast of Selby and 12 miles southeast of York on the eastern bank of the River Derwent, west of which is the Selby district of North Yorkshire. It lies between Selby and Market Wheaton on the A163 road. The civil parish is formed by the villages of Bubwith and Breighton and the hamlets of Gunby and Willitoft. According to the 2011 census, Bubwith parish had a population of 1,225, an increase on the 2001 figure of 1,104. Historically, the chief communication artery to and from Bubwith for many centuries has been the River Derwent. Bubwith stands at a crossing point over the river, and there are natural staithes which make it an ideal landing place for river goods. The village's name means Bubba's Wood, Bubba being a Scandinavian male name. It's listed as Bubwith, spelt B-O-B-E-W-Y-T-H, in the 11th century accounts of Selby Abbey. Meanwhile, in the Domesday Book, Bubwith is written as Bubwid, spelt B-U-B-U-I-D. Before the conquest, lordship was held by Alwyn and Kettle, and after the conquest, Gilbert Tyson became tenant-in-chief. Historically, the soil around the village has been made of partly sand and partly clay, which means that crops such as wheat, oats, barley and potatoes could be grown here. The low-lying lands near the river are called ings, and they yielded very fine crops of hay, but they were frequently flooded when the river was swollen by heavy rain from the hills. When these floods occurred, whole fields of hay were often swept away. Road construction and usage in the Bubwith area has always been limited by the River Derwent. The two ferry crossings at Bubwith and Breighton were at the two local east-west road thoroughfares. However, the major east-west thoroughfare over the Derwent was of course at the main bridge crossing, which prior to the construction of the bridge was on the Pocklington to York Road at Kexby on the present-day A1079, built in the late 1420s, rebuilt in 1650 and turnpiked in 1764. Bubwith was primarily an agricultural parish, and there was very little else in the way of trade carried out here. There were of course local services to serve local needs, and there are some trades directories which mention things such as shopkeepers, tradesmen, butchers, grocers, shoemakers, plumbers, wheelwrights, saddlers, innkeepers, bricklayers, millers, surgeons, schoolmasters and the village blacksmith. There were two breweries in 1823. One was owned by George Blanshard, which produced both malt and beer, and the other was owned by John Young. In 1846, the two breweries were owned by Thomas Crowe and Thomas Turner. Alehouses were ordinary dwellings where the householders served home-brewed ale and beer. By the mid-18th century, larger alehouses were becoming common, whilst inns were purpose-built to accommodate travellers, usually beside the major highways. People who come from Bubwith are known as Bubwits, and there's been a few famous ones throughout history, including Snowdon Dunhill, who was a notorious thief who plagued the East Riding of Yorkshire in the early 1800s. Modern day Bubwith still stands astride the same road that it's grown around and is now more of a commuter village for the towns of Selby, Howden, Goole and Hull. The average house here will cost you around £294,000. Demographically, Bubwith is made up of 99.2% white British citizens, spread over an area that's almost 17 square kilometres in area. This gives Bubwith a population density of 75.35 per kilometre squared. Right, let's see what Bubwith's got in terms of amenities now, and there's no better place to start than right here at its historic church. Trust me, this place has got a lot, and this is the best place to begin. The parish church of All Saints dates from the 12th century and is built in white Tadcaster stone. Some Norman stonework remains, but the structure mainly dates from the 13th to the 15th centuries. It was restored in 1894 and 1895 by C. Hodgson Fowler and Ewan Christian. The church was designated as a Grade 1 listed building in 1960 and is now recorded in the National Heritage List for England and is maintained by Historic England. Over the centuries, the church has witnessed tumultuous events, including the Plague of the 1340s and the Pilgrimage of Grace in 1536, where thousands of local people marched from Skipwith in a protest against religious changes, civil war, and social upheaval. The church has been a place of Christian worship and a place of solace and hope through 2 world wars. Generations of parishioners have been baptised, married, and buried here. The village war memorial is located in the grounds here at the church. Elementary education is provided by Bubwith Community Primary School. Public transport now, and there are 2 buses that stop in Bubwith, predominantly the number 18, which runs to Home on Spalding Moor, and the number 1 to Market Wheaton. Village amenities include an off-licence with a delicatessen, the White Swan Public House, a store, an Indian restaurant award-winning butcher's J.A. Mountfield & Son, and a hairdresser's. The jug and bottle is quite simply Bubwith's most interesting amenity. Owned by Kent native Louise Smith, it's a sandwich shop primarily, but also has a range of cheese available all year round. It also stocks gin, over 100 different types. The White Swan is located on the road towards the Derwent, and this was taken over and refurbished in 2012. A traditional pub, it serves good quality affordable food and beers from Yorkshire breweries including Old Mill and Copper Dragon. Now to the Bubwith Centre, also known as the Leisure Centre, and this hosts Bubwith Playgroup. To the rear of the centre are playing fields. The site holds 3 tennis courts used by the Bubwith Tennis Club. As well as being a leisure centre, this is also used by the local community for private parties and is also used by the youth club. There's a licensed bar, a sports hall that runs events and weekly classes in things like Zumba, Tai Chi, Box Fit and Salsa, and the Cyril Wiles Room is used for Pilates and yoga and the daily Bubwith under 5s. There are 6 acres of playing fields for the local cricket club and the 3 local football clubs. The Derwent forms the county boundary between East Riding and North Yorkshire here in Bubwith. You might remember this park from a parish notice board episode a few weeks ago. This is Tollbridge picnic area. Though there's been a recorded river crossing since at least the year 1200, the present bridge over the Derwent, consisting of 3 limestone arches and several flood arches, replaced a dangerous and inconvenient ferry service when it was built in 1798. Crossing the bridge required a toll until 1936, with the original costs amounting to 3 shillings for 6 horses and 10 pence for 20 head of oxen. Certain vehicles, such as funeral processions, were exempt from the toll. So anyone who's watched my Hemswell video in the West Lindsey series will remember the maypole. I wonder if this is a maypole. It looks like it should be, because halfway up we have some hooks. I imagine that's where the ribbons are attached before it's used. It certainly looks like it's a maypole. Bubwith locals, am I right about that? Is that a maypole? Let me know. The railways reached the village in 1848 and Bubwith had its own station on the Selby to Driffield line. This would close to passengers in 1954. The Selby to Driffield line formed part of a railway which connected the East Coast Main Line and the Yorkshire Coast Line. It crossed largely flat terrain and the Yorkshire Wolds and serviced the towns of Selby, Market Wheaton and Driffield. The line closed for regular passenger traffic on the 20th of September 1954, but a service of one regular non-stop train each way, plus occasional summer excursions, ran until June 1965. The line was abandoned after the last freight train ran later that year. As well as this station, there was also Highfield station on the Selby to Driffield line. This opened as Bubwith Highfield in 1859 and was renamed Highfield on the 1st of December 1873. It too would close on the 20th of September 1954. So once again, here I'm stood on a piece of railway history. I am on the former platform here at Bubwith station. How cool is this? And this will remind you, of course, of the station that we saw in Burstwick. It's very similar, different railway, of course. It's not the same line as that one. And here, this is quite cool. There's this amazing piece of information on this board to do with Bubwith Station. We have some information about the station master, Timothy Glennon, station master in 1872. 1911, I can't read today. The station had a total catchment area with a population of 561. I'll take a couple of shots of this, but the most important part about this, I think, is down here, and it's to do with RAF Breighton. Now, I don't know if that is pronounced Breighton or Breighton or whatever, but I think it's probably Breighton, considering we're close to Market Wheaton and it's spelt the same way, except it's a W instead of the BR. I'm going to call it Breighton for the purposes of this video. If anyone would like to correct me down there, please feel free to do so. And Breighton is where we're about to go right now. It's the next destination within the parish of Bubwith. Breighton is also situated on the east bank of the River Derwent, just to the south of Bubwith. Breighton as a village is very historic, with it likely being founded as a result of the Menthorpe Ferry, which is often referred to as the ferry boat by the locals. The village gained its name from Brixtune, as recorded in the Domesday Book around 1086. Breighton village has existed since at least 1361, with it being recorded that the manor house was in ruin at that time. Very little information is publicly available about the village's history, particularly due to the more important and prominent village of Bubwith to the north. What we do know is that in 1672 the village was described as being well halved and probably fairly wealthy by the half tax returns. There were a number of landowners that had interests in the village at that time, including the Archbishop of York, who was the largest landowner in the area until the 1870s. After the Archbishop of York, the Liversages became lords of the manor, and they kept ownership of the estates until 1918. To the northwest of the main village is the Breighton Ferry Public House. From the Middle Ages until the 1930s, a ferry operated across the Derwent to Menthorpe. The ferry service no longer runs, however there are still a large number of mooring points still in operation, used for the storage of small rivercraft over the winter. The village has had close ties to Bubwith to the north since its founding. These ties were strengthened in 1944 with the closure of Breighton's Wesleyan Chapel, with the village's next closest church or place of worship being in Bubwith. The local school suffered a similar fate, however the time of its destruction is not known. Okay, so the majority of Breighton is laid out along one road. So the camera's going to go on the dashboard and I'll show you what it's like to drive through it towards Bubwith. Nearby is RAF Breighton, built between 1940 and 1942. Its first residents were the number 460 Squadron RAAF. Breighton was also used as the site of an airfield for Halifax, Wellington and Lancaster bombers during the Second World War. It's currently used by the Real Aeroplane Company to house historic aircraft, as well as for hosting an air show. This show is now a private event due to a series of accidents that have occurred over the years. RAF Breighton, or Breighton Airfield as it's commonly known, has the ICAO code of EGBR. From 1959 to 1963, as part of Project Emily, the base was a launch site for 3 nuclear-armed PGM-17 Thor missiles operated by No. 240 Squadron RAF. The base closed in March 1964 when the last active unit withdrew. So I'm led to believe that most of the airfield these days is like an industrial estate, and the only remaining runway here that's used by any aircraft is a grass runway, because the hard standing runways, the concrete runways, are used for these industrial units. And it's not very big. It used to be much bigger. If you look at it on the map, it actually takes up quite a chunk of land. But obviously now it's more to do with the industrial side of things and less to do with aviation. Okay, that's pretty much it for Breighton. There is another hamlet within Bubwith Parish, and that's Willitoft, and I'm going to go there to finish this one off. Let's go. In the Highfield area of Bubwith, which is where Bubwith Highfield Station was, is a studio known as Highfield Grange. This was the base for Arts International, a multidiscipline film, television, radio and stage training centre established by John Cycle in 1990. The centre ran for 15 years until his death in 2005, during which time over 500 students trained here, most of whom have since found work in the entertainment industry. ARTS was an acronym for Advanced Residential Theatre and Television Skill Centre. Its on-site training contained a 200-seat theatre, 3 television studios, a radio studio, and full location equipment for television and 16mm and 35mm film. Arts closed down 6 months after Cycle's death in 2005, and the site has been restored to a usable state as the base for GSP Studios, a small Yorkshire-based film company. And Willitoft is where we finish this one off. This is a hamlet situated just south of the A163 road and west of the B1228 road. It's approximately 8 miles east of Selby and 7 miles north of Gull. This is just really a collection of farms and the odd outlying property, but with a peaceful set of surroundings away from the main Bubwith village, this was a nice place to come and finish this one off. There are some references to a chapel at Willitoft. Currently nothing is known of the foundation or dedication of it, but the earliest known reference dates from 1355 when Pope Innocent VI referred to it following an endowment made to Byland Abbey. The chapel was referred to again in the will of Richard Blanshard in 1486 and during the Parliamentary Survey in 1650. If you drive through Willitoft, you will eventually come to Spaldington. So save for a few more farms, that's pretty much it for Willitoft. It's not really very big. It's a very small hamlet out to the east of Bubwith. And that leaves me with today's picture bit for you. Here it comes right now. And there you have it, that's the parish of Bubwith, and I'm outside the Highfield Grange studios here to finish this one off. Now, it's a bit of a shame that the sun is quite low in the sky and I can't really get a decent shot of it, but that's just how it is. Thankfully, the picture bit has saved me here because there is a nice picture in the picture bit of this place. So hopefully you get the idea behind it. And there you go, that's another one down in the East Riding of Yorkshire, and time for me to move on to my next one. We're slowly getting through them. I've been Andy, this has been the parish of Bubwith, and I've been the Village Idiot, and I'm out.